Hey, fellow car enthusiasts. The 1950s are often seen as a golden era of automotive design. Think elegant curves, towering tail fins, and chrome galore. But let's be real, not every car from that decade was a beauty. In fact, some were downright ugly. As a car expert, I've come across plenty of design blunders. But these 15 cars from the 1950s stand out as some of the worst offenders. Prepare to be shocked as we dive into the 15 ugliest cars from the 1950s. Though officially introduced in 1949, the Nash Airflight remains one of the most visually peculiar cars of its era, and it certainly deserves a spot on any list of odd automotive designs. The Airflight was Nash's bold attempt to embrace aerodynamics and streamline engineering, but its execution left many scratching their heads. The car's bulbous, egg-like shape and overly rounded body panels were intended to reduce drag and improve fuel efficiency. But these design choices resulted in an awkward and almost cartoonish appearance that alienated potential buyers. At a time when American cars were known for sleek lines, chrome accents, and elongated bodies, the Nash Airflight stood out for all the wrong reasons. Its squat, pudgy profile gave it an ungainly look, and its massive, curved front grille looked more like an air vent from a science fiction movie than the front end of a stylish vehicle. The Airflight's roofline sloped down into an odd rear end that only enhanced its egg-like silhouette, creating proportions that felt out of balance with other cars of the time. The car's designers were aiming for something futuristic and aerodynamic, believing that the rounded shape would help the Airflight glide more efficiently through the air. While the idea of improving aerodynamics was forward-thinking, the execution was far from appealing. The car looked more like a pod or a capsule than an elegant sedan. While the curved shape did contribute to better airflow and marginally improved fuel efficiency, this technical benefit was overshadowed by its aesthetic shortcomings. One of the most jarring aspects of the Airflight's design was how out of step it was with contemporary automotive tastes. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, car buyers were gravitating toward designs that embodied luxury, power, and modernity. Cars that were low-slung, stylish, and exuded confidence. By contrast, the Nash Airflight's chubby, closed-in look felt like a throwback to pre-war designs rather than a step forward. Its proportions were awkward, with a body that seemed too wide for its length and a front end that bulged out unnaturally, giving it an odd visual weight. The interior of the Nash Airflight was also somewhat peculiar. In keeping with its aerodynamic theme, the car featured a unique uniscope instrument cluster, which was mounted high on the dashboard in an attempt to streamline the driving experience. However, this too felt out of place, as it lacked the elegance or intuitive design seen in other cars of the era. Despite its off-putting looks, Nash did try to market the Airflight's unique characteristics as selling points. The company emphasized the car's fuel efficiency thanks to its aerodynamic shape and promoted its spacious interior, claiming it provided more headroom and legroom than competitors. While these were valid points, they weren't enough to overcome the Airflight's unfortunate aesthetics. Buyers simply didn't warm to the car's unconventional design, and its sales figures reflected that. In the end, the Nash Airflight's attempt to balance futuristic engineering with striking design fell flat. It may have been innovative in some respects, but its odd proportions, bulbous shape, and general lack of visual appeal made it a flop in the eyes of many car enthusiasts. Today, it's remembered more as a curiosity than a classic, a symbol of how even well-intentioned innovation can miss the mark when style is sacrificed in the name of function. The Nash Airflight stands as a reminder that while aerodynamics and efficiency are important, automotive design still relies heavily on aesthetics. No amount of technical advantage could save the Airflight from its unfortunate looks, and it remains one of the more head-scratching designs in American automotive history. The Kaiser Dragon was an ambitious attempt by Kaiser Motors to create a luxury car that stood out from the crowd, but it ended up being unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Launched in the early 1950s, the Dragon was intended to showcase top-tier craftsmanship and innovative design. But instead, it became a lesson in how too much styling can lead to a disastrous result. Its excessive use of chrome, textured materials, and overall clunky appearance made it more of a curiosity than a true luxury vehicle. One of the most striking features of the Kaiser Dragon was its thick chrome trim, which seemed to dominate nearly every surface of the car. While chrome accents were a common feature in 1950s American cars, Kaiser took it to an extreme with the Dragon, covering the car in gleaming metal that made it look heavier and more cumbersome than it actually was. The overuse of chrome didn't enhance the car's luxury appeal. It overwhelmed the design, giving the Dragon a gaudy, almost clunky appearance that detracted from its overall aesthetic. Another defining characteristic of the Dragon was its vinyl roof, made from a material called bamboo vinyl, which was supposed to evoke the exotic look of bamboo. This textured top was intended to make the Dragon stand out from other luxury cars of the time, giving it a unique, high-end appearance. Unfortunately, the execution fell short. The bamboo vinyl, rather than giving the car an air of sophistication, gave it a strange, artificial look that clashed with the rest of the car's design. The idea of mimicking bamboo in a luxury car was a bold, if not bizarre, design choice that didn't resonate with buyers. The boxy shape of the Kaiser Dragon didn't do it any favors either. While the car was built on the same platform as other Kaiser models, the Dragon's exaggerated proportions gave it a blocky, almost awkward appearance. It lacked the sleek lines and graceful curves that were becoming more popular in luxury cars of the time. The Dragon's hefty, squared-off body seemed out of place in an era when car design was moving toward more streamlined and aerodynamic shapes. Its bulky silhouette made it look more utilitarian than luxurious, further undermining its appeal. Inside, the Dragon aimed to exude opulence with its lavish interior, featuring leather upholstery and high-quality materials. However, much like the exterior, the interior design suffered from an overabundance of textures and patterns. The combination of leather, chrome, and elaborate fabrics gave the cabin a busy, cluttered look, rather than the elegant simplicity found in other luxury cars of the time. The interior may have been comfortable and well-appointed, but it lacked the refinement that true luxury buyers were looking for. While the Dragon was marketed as a premium offering, it struggled to compete with more established luxury brands like Cadillac and Lincoln. Kaiser Motors, being a smaller manufacturer, didn't have the same resources or brand recognition as its competitors, and the Dragon's odd design choices didn't help its cause. Buyers looking for a luxury car were often turned off by the Dragon's quirky appearance and over-the-top styling, leading to poor sales and an early demise for the model. Despite its good intentions, the Kaiser Dragon was ultimately a misstep in automotive design. It tried to stand out with bold styling and unique materials, but these choices backfired, giving the car an awkward and overly flashy appearance that failed to capture the attention of luxury car buyers. Today, the Dragon is remembered more for its eccentricities than for its luxury, serving as a cautionary tale of how too much design innovation can sometimes go wrong. In hindsight, the Kaiser Dragon's combination of clashing textures, excessive chrome, and boxy proportions make it a prime example of over-design in the automotive world. While it may have been a unique offering in the luxury car market of the 1950s, its aesthetic missteps overshadowed any true luxury or innovation it may have had. The Dragon remains an odd footnote in automotive history, often cited as one of the more peculiar vehicles to come out of the post-war era. While Packard was renowned for crafting some of the most elegant and luxurious vehicles of the early 20th century, the mid-1950s Caribbean convertible is a stark exception. Introduced as a flagship model meant to showcase Packard's finest, the Caribbean ended up being an example of what can go wrong when a car tries too hard to stand out. With a clumsy mix of design elements, oversized chrome, flashy two-tone or tri-tone paint schemes, and exaggerated rear fenders, the Caribbean looked more like a disjointed collection of trends than a cohesive luxury car. One of the most glaring design flaws of the Caribbean convertible was its excessive use of chrome. In the 1950s, chrome was a staple of automotive design, symbolizing modernity and luxury, but Packard took it to an extreme with the Caribbean. Massive chrome bumpers, gaudy trim, and shiny accents were plastered all over the car, giving it a bloated, almost garish appearance. Rather than enhancing the car's prestige, the chrome-heavy design made it feel excessive and overdone, lacking the refinement that Packard had been known for in its earlier models. Then there was the color scheme. Packard offered the Caribbean in a variety of bold, contrasting two-tone and even three-tone paint combinations, which may have been intended to look avant-garde and fashionable. However, instead of exuding sophistication, the unusual color combinations made the car seem more garish than luxurious. The clashing colors drew attention to the car's awkward proportions, with the mismatched hues accentuating its overstuffed and overcomplicated appearance. The color schemes did little to enhance the Caribbean's lines, instead emphasizing its bulkiness and lack of flow. The rear of the Packard Caribbean was perhaps its most unfortunate design element. The exaggerated rear fenders were supposed to give the car a sense of grandeur and presence, but in reality, they only contributed to its awkward proportions. The oversized fenders, which ballooned out from the sides of the car, seemed out of place and overly dramatic, making the rear end look heavy and unwieldy. In an era when sleek, aerodynamic designs were becoming more popular, the Caribbean's bulky rear fenders felt like a step backward, reminiscent of an earlier time when bigger was always considered better. Instead of being graceful, the fenders made the car look clumsy and unbalanced. The Caribbean's interior, while luxurious in terms of materials, suffered from the same over-the-top design ethos as the exterior. The interior was filled with buttons, gadgets, and flashy trim, but it lacked the cohesive design and elegance that competitors like Cadillac and Lincoln had mastered. Even though Packard tried to market the Caribbean as an ultra-premium vehicle with features like power windows and seats, the overall feel of the interior was more cluttered than opulent. It was a car that seemed to be trying too hard to impress with features, while failing to offer the quiet, understated luxury that Packard's wealthier clients were looking for. What makes the Caribbean's failure even more significant is the context in which it was released. By the mid-1950s, Packard was struggling to maintain its identity as a luxury automaker. The brand, which had once symbolized the pinnacle of American automotive engineering, was beginning to lose its way, and the Caribbean was one of Packard's last attempts to recapture the prestige it had enjoyed in its heyday. Unfortunately, the Caribbean's gaudy, disjointed styling only further alienated buyers who were looking for a refined, elegant luxury car. Competing luxury brands like Cadillac and Lincoln were offering vehicles with sleek, modern designs that were both stylish and sophisticated. In contrast, the Caribbean felt like it was stuck in the past, with its heavy-handed use of chrome, awkward proportions, and mismatched design elements. Buyers were turned off by the car's overly flamboyant appearance, preferring the cleaner, more graceful lines of its rivals. Even though the Caribbean was equipped with a powerful engine and had some advanced features for its time, its off-putting design overshadowed any mechanical advantages it may have had. Ultimately, the Packard Caribbean convertible became a symbol of the brand's decline. What was intended to be a showcase of luxury and innovation ended up being a confused, overstyled vehicle that couldn't keep up with the competition. The Caribbean's lack of design cohesion and over-the-top aesthetics failed to capture the elegance that Packard had once been famous for, and it became one of the last gasps of a company struggling to remain relevant in a rapidly changing market. Today, the Caribbean is remembered more as an oddity than as an example of Packard's former greatness. A car that epitomizes how even the most prestigious brands can lose their way. The Studebaker Champion had its moments of brilliance, but the 1950 model year is often remembered for some truly strange design choices that made it stand out, for all the wrong reasons. At a time when post-war car designs were evolving towards more sleek and modern looks, Studebaker seemed to veer in a different, more peculiar direction. The Champion's front end, with its narrow grille and flat, wide nose, gave it a face that looked more like a cartoon caricature than the sophisticated front of a mid-century automobile. The narrow grille, paired with the oversized headlights and broad front bumper, seemed out of proportion, creating an unbalanced, almost comical appearance that drew the wrong kind of attention. One of the most striking oddities was the shape of the nose. The wide, flat surface lacked the smooth curves or sharp lines seen on other cars of the time, giving the front of the Champion a blunt, uninspired look. It appeared as though the designers had simply slapped a grille onto a wide blank canvas, making the front end feel incomplete. Instead of the bold, modern styling that competitors were pushing, the Champion came off as awkward and clumsy, struggling to find a cohesive identity. The rear of the car didn't fare much better. In fact, the back of the 1950 Champion is one of its most criticized aspects. The tail seemed almost like an afterthought, with a design that appeared half-finished. The shape was boxy and flat, lacking the elegant curves that were becoming more popular in the industry. There was an awkwardness to how the trunk sloped, as if the designers couldn't decide whether to make it more streamlined or stick with a utilitarian boxy look. The result was a rear end that felt disconnected from the front, as if two different teams had worked on the car without communicating. While the Champion had always been intended as an economical, practical vehicle, the 1950 model's design didn't manage to combine functionality with aesthetics. The car's awkward proportions, especially the disjointed look of the front and rear, made it hard to find a balance between innovation and practicality. Even though the Champion was reliable and affordable, traits that had long defined Studebaker's success, the off-putting design choices made it harder for consumers to embrace this model. Beyond its visual quirks, the Champion also faced stiff competition from other manufacturers who were starting to understand how to blend post-war engineering advances with modern, attractive design. Brands like Chevrolet and Ford were offering sleeker, more polished cars at similar price points, and this left Studebaker's oddly styled Champion struggling to keep up. While the Champion may have been a dependable car under the hood, its exterior was simply too strange to compete in an era when styling was becoming a crucial aspect of a car's appeal. Despite these design missteps, the 1950 Champion wasn't a complete failure. It still found buyers who valued practicality and Studebaker's reputation for engineering. However, in terms of style and aesthetics, it was a step in the wrong direction. The design choices made in the 1950 model year marked a turning point, as Studebaker's designers tried to innovate but ended up creating a car that looked out of place even in its own time. Looking back today, the 1950 Studebaker Champion is often remembered for its quirky, almost experimental design. It's a reminder that even automakers with solid reputations for quality and performance can sometimes take risks that don't pay off, leaving behind cars that feel more like curiosities than icons. The Champion's odd proportions and clumsy design choices from this era serve as a testament to how difficult it is to balance innovation with timeless design. Though its reliability and affordability were enough to keep it on the road, its strange styling has made it one of the more peculiar cars of the decade, with a look that's more memorable for its weirdness than its beauty. The Plymouth Belvedere of the late 1950s had an unmistakable presence, with its aggressive stance and towering rear fins that were emblematic of the era's obsession with futuristic, jet-inspired designs. Yet despite its bold, eye-catching rear, the front end of the Belvedere was a completely different story, one that missed the mark in terms of design harmony. The front grille, in particular, was overdone, and it was here that the car's otherwise powerful image fell apart. The grille was awash with chrome, almost to a fault. Rather than enhancing the car's sleek lines, the excessive chrome made the front end appear cluttered and heavy, undermining the streamlined look that other cars of the late 50s were starting to embrace. The designers seemed to be aiming for opulence and strength, but they ended up with something that looked almost comical. The large chrome bars running across the front of the car, combined with the exaggerated headlight placement, gave the Belvedere a bug-eyed appearance, an unfortunate characteristic for a vehicle that was supposed to look sharp and intimidating. The headlights were set wide apart and positioned higher than one might expect, giving the car an unbalanced look from the front. This design choice detracted from the aggressive, sleek profile that the rest of the car suggested. Instead of the menacing, futuristic look that Plymouth likely intended, the front of the Belvedere had a bulbous, almost cartoonish quality. It was a design clash. The wide, flat expanse of chrome below the headlights made the grille look overbearing, while the oddly spaced lights gave the car a slightly startled expression, like a deer caught in headlights. Ironically, it was the back of the Belvedere that became iconic, with its towering fins and streamlined, jet age influences. These fins, coupled with the car's low-slung body and swept-back profile, gave the Belvedere an air of speed and power, even while standing still. The rear end was daring, bold, and in line with the futuristic design trends of the time, capturing the optimism of the late 1950s. However, this only made the missteps in the front-end design more glaring. The disconnect between the overstyled, cluttered front and the sleek, futuristic rear created a car that, while memorable, lacked cohesion. The Belvedere's design highlights the struggle that many American car manufacturers faced in the late 1950s. The desire to push the limits of styling, often at the expense of balance and elegance. While other brands were moving toward a more integrated look, the Belvedere's front end looked like it belonged to a different car altogether, one that didn't quite share the same vision as the rest of the vehicle. This lack of harmony between the front and back hurt the car's overall aesthetic appeal. Despite these design flaws, the Belvedere remains a notable car from the era, if for no other reason than its ambition. The front end, with its heavy-handed chrome and awkward headlight placement, might have been a design misfire, but it was also part of a broader attempt to create a vehicle that stood out in a crowded marketplace. And in that regard, Plymouth succeeded, though perhaps not always for the right reasons. In retrospect, the Belvedere's bug-eyed front grille stands as an example of how even bold designs can go too far. While the fins and rear of the car have aged gracefully and are now celebrated as hallmarks of 1950s automotive styling, the front end remains a reminder that sometimes less is more. The overuse of chrome and the odd placement of design elements detracted from what could have been a more refined, balanced look. Instead, the Belvedere is remembered as a car of extremes, with a front and back that seem to be working at cross purposes. Today, the Plymouth Belvedere is often looked at with a mix of nostalgia and bemusement. Its front end may not have lived up to the promise of its striking rear, but it has nonetheless carved out a place in automotive history, for better or worse. While the design may not have been cohesive, the Belvedere remains a bold symbol of the era's ambition and the lengths to which manufacturers were willing to go to stand out in an increasingly competitive market. When it comes to automotive missteps of the 1950s, the Ford Edsel often takes center stage, and for good reason. This car has become synonymous with failure, and much of its notoriety stems from its bizarre, polarizing design, particularly the infamous horse collar grille. Ford had high hopes for the Edsel, but its unusual aesthetics, especially that front-end design, quickly turned the car into an icon of how not to approach automotive styling. The grille was undoubtedly the Edsel's most talked-about feature, and not in a flattering way. Its vertical oval shape was intended to stand out from the standard horizontal grilles found on most cars of the time, but instead it became a design disaster. The problem was not just the grille's odd shape, but how out of place it looked in relation to the rest of the car. The surrounding body had a more conventional 1950s design, with long, sweeping lines and a wide, flat stance. This made the grille look like a bizarre afterthought, as though it belonged on an entirely different car. Dubbed the horse collar or toilet seat grille by critics, it was placed front and center, demanding attention for all the wrong reasons. It clashed with the car's otherwise broad, horizontal design elements, creating a jarring visual experience. Rather than appearing innovative or luxurious, qualities Ford was desperately trying to associate with the Edsel. The grille gave the car a comically awkward face. It's as if the designers tried too hard to make the Edsel stand out, only to create something that looked cartoonish and disproportionate. Beyond its unfortunate aesthetics, the grille also created practical issues. It made the car look bulky and heavy from the front, which detracted from any sense of sleekness or speed. The vertical design disrupted the flow of the car's body lines, making the Edsel appear ungainly and difficult to manage. Buyers who were hoping for a fresh, futuristic look were instead met with a car that seemed oddly stuck between eras, neither embracing the streamlined, jet-age designs of the late 50s, nor adhering to the traditional, more conservative styling of earlier decades. Despite the massive marketing push Ford invested in the Edsel, no amount of advertising could make up for its awkward appearance. The company had positioned the Edsel as a forward-thinking, aspirational vehicle, but the design made it difficult for buyers to see it as such. The car's grille became a focal point for the public's disdain, representing everything that was wrong with the Edsel, and by extension, with Ford's misjudged approach to the market. The grille wasn't just unattractive, it became a symbol of excess, poor planning, and automotive hubris. Ford had hoped to revolutionize the automotive industry with the Edsel, but the grille became one of the most immediate reasons people rejected the car. It was supposed to be a design feature that distinguished the Edsel from its competitors, but instead it alienated potential buyers. As people tried to wrap their heads around why the grille looked the way it did, the car's other flaws, such as its high price, confusing market position, and mechanical issues, came under scrutiny, further sealing its fate. In a decade known for its bold, even flamboyant car designs, the Edsel's front end stood out, but not in the way Ford intended. While other cars of the 1950s embraced wide grilles, chrome, and fins that evoked speed and modernity, the Edsel seemed like a car that didn't know what it wanted to be. The horse-collar grille gave it an awkwardly retro look that felt out of sync with the rest of the industry's design trends. It wasn't just ugly, it was confusing, and in a competitive market, confusion can be fatal. Over time, the Edsel has become a case study in automotive history, a cautionary tale of how design choices can make or break a car, no matter how much money is spent on marketing. The grille in particular has lived on in infamy, often appearing in lists of the worst design decisions in automotive history. While some enthusiasts may now view the Edsel as an underappreciated oddity or a collectible piece of American car history, it's hard to escape the reality that its front-end design was one of the main reasons for its failure. In the years since the Edsel's short-lived production run, car designers have learned a lot about the importance of proportion, balance, and coherence. The Edsel, with its oversized, awkward grille, serves as a reminder that trying too hard to be different can sometimes backfire spectacularly. Ford's ambitious attempt to create a new luxury car ended up looking, to many, like a caricature of what a car should be. The Hudson Hornet Hollywood Coupe from the 1950s is a prime example of a car with a design that felt oddly disjointed. While the front end of the Hornet was relatively sleek and in line with the styling cues of its time, the rear of the car introduced a sloping roofline and disproportionate elements that left many people scratching their heads. It was as if two different design philosophies were at play, resulting in a car that looked almost like it had been pieced together from different models. Starting with the front end, the Hudson Hornet Hollywood Coupe wasn't particularly offensive. It followed the design trends of the era, with a prominent grille, dual headlights, and a broad horizontal stance. There was a sense of balance and symmetry that made the car's front appealing enough. It embodied the robust and aerodynamic look that Hudson had cultivated, giving the car a sense of power and speed. The problem, however, became immediately apparent when you looked beyond the front half of the vehicle. As the roofline began to slope toward the back, the car's design took a sharp turn into awkward territory. The fastback styling, which was intended to make the Hornet look sleek and futuristic, felt poorly executed. The roofline was too steep, creating a visual imbalance that made the car look bottom-heavy. This abrupt slope was not gradual or graceful. It felt forced, almost as if the designers had run out of time to smooth out the transition. The result was a vehicle that seemed lopsided and inconsistent. The rear of the Hornet was even more perplexing. It featured oversized taillights that dominated the back of the car, detracting from any sense of subtlety or elegance. These taillights were not just large, they were exaggerated to the point of absurdity, which made the rear end look bulbous and disproportionate compared to the sleek front. Instead of complementing the rest of the car's design, the taillights made the Hornet appear bloated and ungainly. Adding to the confusion was the slanted back window, which did little to enhance the car's overall look. In an era where many cars were experimenting with rear window shapes and angles, Hudson's attempt felt clumsy. The steep angle of the rear window made it appear impractical, as if it was meant more for style than function, except the style itself was questionable. The window cut into the rear body awkwardly, making the Hornet's rear end look unfinished, almost like an afterthought. This lack of cohesion between the roofline, rear window, and taillights gave the impression that the designers couldn't quite agree on what they wanted the car to be. The problem with the Hudson Hornet Hollywood Coupe wasn't just that it had a strange rear end. It was that the car seemed to have two completely different personalities, split between its front and rear halves. The front half of the car was relatively normal, embracing the design language of the early 1950s with its smooth lines and aerodynamic curves. The rear, on the other hand, was an experiment in excess that didn't pay off. The result was a car that felt visually confusing and lacked the harmony that many of its competitors were achieving at the time. Hudson's attempt to blend fastback styling with the bulkier, more substantial proportions of the Hornet body ultimately fell flat. While fastback designs can be sleek and appealing when executed properly, the Hornet's roofline and rear styling felt awkward and mismatched. It's as if the designers were trying to make a heavy, substantial car look lightweight and sporty, but the proportions just didn't work. Instead of achieving elegance or agility, the car appeared clunky and awkward, particularly from the side and rear. The Hudson Hornet Hollywood Coupe is a case study in how conflicting design elements can undermine a car's appeal. While Hudson had been known for producing competitive and stylish cars, particularly in the racing world, the Hollywood Coupe seemed to struggle with its identity. It wasn't sure if it wanted to be a luxury car, a sporty fastback, or a full-size family vehicle. This lack of direction in the design left it with a look that didn't resonate with buyers at the time, nor has it aged particularly well. In the context of 1950s car design, where boldness was often celebrated, the Hudson Hornet Hollywood Coupe missed the mark by trying to blend too many ideas into one package. Instead of feeling innovative or daring, it just felt confusing. Hudson may have been trying to stand out in a crowded market, but the end result was a car that looked like it had been cobbled together from mismatched parts. The exaggerated proportions, oversized taillights, and awkward sloping roofline turned what could have been a handsome car into an aesthetic misfire. The Dodge Wayfarer Roadster, though introduced in the late 1940s, is a prime example of how some cars can carry design elements that quickly become outdated. By the time it continued production into the early 1950s, the automotive landscape was changing rapidly, with sleek flowing lines and bold flashy details becoming the hallmark of the decade. Unfortunately, the Wayfarer Roadster's overly simplistic, boxy design seemed stuck in the past, making it look dull and uninspired compared to its more modern counterparts. One of the biggest issues with the Wayfarer Roadster was its complete lack of visual flair. Its body was a no-nonsense, square-shaped structure that did little to catch the eye. While some might argue that its minimalist design was part of its charm, in the context of the 1950s, where cars were becoming more expressive and experimental, the Wayfarer's plainness made it look like a relic from a bygone era. Its flat surfaces and straight lines lacked the curves and contours that were quickly becoming fashionable, leaving it looking static and outdated. The front end of the Wayfarer Roadster was particularly uninspired. While many cars of the time were adopting bold grilles and elaborate headlight designs, the Wayfarer seemed content with a flat, almost featureless face. The grille was small and unremarkable, offering none of the chrome-heavy glamour that many other manufacturers were embracing. The headlights, rather than being integrated into the design in a way that enhanced the car's appearance, simply sat there as functional necessities, with little thought given to their aesthetic placement. The result was a front end that felt utilitarian rather than stylish, almost as if it had been designed with the sole intention of being practical rather than visually appealing. The rear of the Wayfarer Roadster didn't fare much better. In an era where tail fins and intricate rear designs were becoming popular, the Wayfarer's back end seemed like an afterthought. There was virtually no rear styling to speak of, just a flat, boxy surface that lacked any of the dynamic shapes or interesting features that were becoming common in the 1950s. This lack of attention to detail at the rear made the car feel incomplete, as if the designers had focused on the bare minimum necessary to make it functional without giving any thought to how it would actually look. Another element that contributed to the Wayfarer's awkwardness was its overall proportions. The car was relatively short and squat, which only emphasized its boxy shape. Unlike some of the longer, more elegant cars of the time that had sleek, elongated bodies, the Wayfarer looked compressed and somewhat awkward. Its short wheelbase and wide stance gave it an unbalanced appearance, as if it were meant to be a smaller car, but had been stretched in the wrong places. This was particularly noticeable when compared to other roadsters of the time, which often had a more graceful, elongated silhouette that gave them a sense of speed and style even when standing still. What made the Dodge Wayfarer Roadster even more out of place was the fact that it was competing in a decade that saw the rise of some truly iconic automotive designs. Cars like the Chevrolet Bel Air, the Ford Thunderbird, and the Cadillac Eldorado were pushing the boundaries of style and luxury with intricate details, flowing lines, and bold chrome accents that captured the imagination of the American public. The Wayfarer, by contrast, seemed to lack any sense of ambition or creativity. It was a simple, no-frills vehicle at a time when consumers were starting to expect more excitement and personality from their cars. The Wayfarer's outdated design also extended to its interior. While the cabins of many cars in the 1950s were becoming more luxurious and stylish, with attention paid to materials, color schemes, and overall comfort, the Wayfarer's interior was Spartan and utilitarian. There were no flashy details or luxurious appointments, just basic seating and a dashboard that seemed to prioritize function over form. This only added to the impression that the car was stuck in a previous era, where practicality was more important than style or comfort. Despite its design flaws, the Dodge Wayfarer Roadster did have its niche. It was an affordable, no-nonsense car that appealed to budget-conscious buyers who weren't necessarily looking for the latest in automotive fashion. Its simplicity made it reliable and easy to maintain, which was a selling point for some consumers. However, in the context of the 1950s, when cars were becoming more than just practical transportation and evolving into symbols of personal expression and status, the Wayfarer's lack of style made it a tough sell for those who wanted to keep up with the times. The Chevrolet 150 was introduced as a budget-friendly model, stripped of the fancy features and styling that graced higher-end Chevys like the Bel Air. It was marketed as the practical, no-nonsense choice for those who simply needed reliable transportation without the flash or frills. However, in an era where cars were becoming symbols of style and personal expression, the 150's plain and uninspired design stood out, and not in a good way. The bare-bones nature of the 150 extended to its looks, making it an ugly duckling compared to its more refined siblings. The 150's exterior was defined by its simplicity, but that simplicity often came across as bland and uninspired. Where other models boasted sweeping chrome accents and intricate details, the 150 was devoid of these touches. The lack of chrome trim made the car look unfinished, as if it were a prototype that hadn't yet been dressed up for public release. The basic, boxy shape gave the car a utilitarian appearance that lacked any sense of style or excitement, and its design was functional but far from aesthetically pleasing. One of the most noticeable aspects of the Chevrolet 150's design was its front end. While many cars of the time sported bold grills and attention-grabbing headlights, the 150's front was plain and forgettable. The grille was a simple, horizontal affair with minimal decoration, contributing to the overall sense that this car wasn't meant to stand out. Even the headlights, which on many cars were a defining feature, were basic and unremarkable on the 150. The lack of any distinctive design elements up front made the car blend into the background, a far cry from the more elaborate and eye-catching designs that were gaining popularity in the 1950s. The side profile of the Chevrolet 150 was equally unremarkable. It lacked the flowing lines and subtle curves that could make even a budget car look stylish. Instead, the 150 had a flat, almost slab-like appearance that did little to catch the eye. Its doors and panels were basic in the extreme, with no real effort made to create an appealing silhouette. This lack of design ambition made the car look utilitarian to the point of being unattractive. For drivers who cared about appearance, the 150 was simply too plain to be desirable. At the rear, the Chevrolet 150 continued its theme of simplicity to a fault. While other cars of the era featured intricate tail fins or carefully crafted taillight designs, the 150 had none of these features. The back end of the car was as basic as the front, with a boxy shape and minimal detailing. The taillights were small and unobtrusive, blending into the car's rear without adding any visual interest. This stark rear design made the car seem unfinished, and its overall lack of visual cohesion didn't help its case. Inside the Chevrolet 150, the bare-bones approach continued. The interior was functional, but entirely devoid of luxury or comfort features. While higher-end models had plush seating, chrome accents, and stylish dashboards, the 150's cabin was austere. The materials used were basic, with minimal attention paid to aesthetics or driver comfort. The dashboard was simple and straightforward, lacking the decorative elements that made other cars feel more upscale. For buyers, the interior of the 15.0 emphasized the car's budget status, making it clear that this was a no-frills option for those who didn't mind a basic driving experience. Despite its plain design, the Chevrolet 150 did serve a purpose. It was an affordable and reliable option for families or businesses that needed transportation without the added costs of luxury features. However, in a decade that was becoming increasingly defined by automotive style, the 150's utilitarian appearance set it apart for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't necessarily ugly in the traditional sense, but it was so devoid of character and style that it was often considered unattractive by the standards of the time. The 1950s were a time when cars were not just about transportation, but about making a statement. The Chevrolet 150, with its minimal design and lack of any real flair, failed to make much of a statement at all. In a market that was increasingly valuing bold, stylish designs, the 150's plainness made it seem outdated and out of touch. Even though it was dependable and affordable, it didn't offer the excitement or visual appeal that many buyers were looking for. In this sense, the Chevrolet 150 stands out as one of the less attractive models of its time. Ultimately, the Chevrolet 150 is remembered not for any design breakthroughs, but for its basic, utilitarian nature. While it served its purpose as a budget-friendly car, its plain exterior, uninspired front end, and lackluster interior made it far from appealing to those who wanted a car that looked as good as it performed. The Buick Special of the 1950s is a prime example of how sometimes more isn't always better. Designed to capture the essence of luxury and elegance that Buick was known for, the Special instead became notorious for its over-the-top, cumbersome design choices. One of the most striking features of this era's Special was its colossal front grille. Intended to make a bold statement, the grille instead often came across as excessive and unwieldy. It dominated the front end, overshadowing the car's overall design and giving it an unwelcome, heavy look. The grille's sheer size, coupled with an overabundance of chrome, created a front end that seemed to droop rather than dazzle. This massive chrome bumper, while meant to exude luxury, often ended up giving the Special a tired, sagging appearance. The headlights, deeply set into the front fenders, were overshadowed by the overwhelming grille, further contributing to the car's droopy look. Instead of enhancing the vehicle's appearance, these design elements combined to create a front end that felt more burdensome than elegant. Buick's reputation for luxury and sophistication was well earned in the mid-20th century, with many models showcasing refined design and attention to detail. However, the 1950s Buick Special diverged from this tradition. While other Buicks of the time managed to balance boldness with grace, the Special seemed to have missed that delicate balance. The car's overall design, with its heavy grille and large chrome elements, felt out of sync with the more streamlined and stylish trends of the era. The Special's body design didn't fare much better. The rest of the car's proportions struggled to complement the oversized front end. The result was a car that looked disjointed, with its front end appearing at odds with the rest of the vehicle. The overall impression was one of a car that tried too hard to impress, but ended up looking awkward and out of touch. In the 1950s, car buyers were increasingly drawn to sleek, dynamic designs that hinted at speed and elegance. The Buick Special, with its overly large grille and heavy chrome accents, stood in stark contrast to these trends. Rather than embodying the sophistication Buick was known for, the Special's design choices often made it look outdated and less refined compared to its competitors. Despite these design flaws, the Buick Special did offer some notable features and a comfortable driving experience, but its appearance left much to be desired. The car's grand ambitions in terms of style did not translate into the kind of visual appeal that would endear it to buyers. Instead of being remembered for its luxury and grace, the Special became known for its missteps in design. In hindsight, the 1950s Buick Special serves as a reminder of the risks involved in pushing design boundaries without a clear sense of balance. While the intent was to create a car that stood out and made a statement, the execution resulted in a model that struggled to harmonize its elements. The massive grille and heavy chrome bumper, intended to signify luxury and grandeur, instead contributed to a look that many found off-putting and less sophisticated than the era's other offerings. Ultimately, the Buick Special of the 1950s highlights how ambitious design efforts can sometimes miss the mark, especially when they lean too heavily on dramatic elements without considering the overall cohesion of the vehicle's appearance. It's a classic example of how luxury and style are as much about subtlety and balance as they are about bold statements. And in this instance, the Special's design choices led it astray. The Nash Rambler, introduced in the late 1950s, was a pioneering effort in the compact car market. However, its approach to compactness took things to an extreme that resulted in a design that many found peculiar and awkward. While the trend towards smaller cars was in full swing, aiming to provide efficient and economical transportation, the Rambler's execution of this concept often drew more criticism than praise. At the heart of the Rambler's design issues was its tall, narrow body. This shape was intended to maximize interior space within a compact footprint, but it also created an unusual visual impression. The high roofline and slim profile gave the Rambler a rather disproportionate look, making it appear more like a toy car than a serious, functional vehicle. The tiny wheels further exaggerated this effect, contributing to a cartoonish appearance that was at odds with the more streamlined and stylish designs of its competitors. The Rambler's front end was another area where the design fell short. The small, upright grille was intended to be a signature feature, but instead it looked diminutive and out of place. Combined with the flat face of the car, the grille did little to enhance the Rambler's aesthetic appeal. Rather than conveying the sleek efficiency that compact cars were meant to represent, the Rambler's front end seemed almost comical, failing to project the seriousness and sophistication that buyers typically sought in their vehicles. In terms of proportions, the Rambler's design was a case study in how pushing the limits of compactness can sometimes lead to less desirable outcomes. The car's height and width created a visual imbalance, where the overall shape lacked harmony and elegance. This was a stark contrast to the more balanced and well-proportioned designs emerging from other manufacturers, which managed to combine compactness with a sense of style and practicality. Despite these design challenges, the Nash Rambler was a significant vehicle in automotive history. It was one of the first cars to really push the boundaries of compact car design, reflecting the growing consumer demand for more economical and space-efficient vehicles. However, its extreme approach to compactness resulted in a car that was often viewed as more of a curiosity than a success. The Rambler's distinctive appearance made it memorable, but not always in a flattering way. In summary, while the Nash Rambler was a trailblazer in the realm of compact cars, its design choices often led to a less than ideal visual outcome. The tall, narrow body and small wheels, combined with a quirky front grille, resulted in a car that looked more like a caricature of a compact vehicle than a well-executed model. The Rambler's attempts to redefine compactness were bold, but they also highlight the risks of pushing design concepts to their extremes without considering the overall aesthetics and practicality. The Mercury Monterey, especially in its 1950s iterations, stands out for its decidedly unconventional design, particularly when it comes to the front end. Mercury aimed to distinguish the Monterey with a bold, distinctive look, but the execution often missed the mark, resulting in one of the more unusual and less attractive cars of the era. The front end of the Mercury Monterey was characterized by its split grille design, which was a departure from the more streamlined, integrated grilles common in that period. Instead of achieving a sleek, modern appearance, the split grille gave the Monterey an uneven and awkward look. The grille was flanked by headlights that were set in an unusual, almost bug-eyed placement. This arrangement did little to enhance the car's aesthetic appeal and contributed to a front end that many found to be more comical than sophisticated. Adding to the front end's design challenges was the excessive use of chrome. While chrome detailing was a popular styling choice in the 1950s, The Monterey's application was particularly overbearing. The massive front bumper, adorned with extensive chrome trim, further exaggerated the car's odd proportions. Instead of contributing to a sense of luxury and elegance, the chrome and bulky bumper created a visual clutter that detracted from the overall design harmony. The combination of these elements resulted in a front end that was visually heavy and disproportionate. The design aimed for boldness and uniqueness, but instead achieved a look that many considered unattractive. The bug-eyed headlights and split grille, while intended to make a statement, instead contributed to a car that looked awkward and out of place among its more streamlined contemporaries. The Mercury Monterey's front-end design issues were not isolated. They reflected broader design trends of the 1950s, where some manufacturers experimented with bold, unconventional styles that sometimes didn't translate well into attractive, cohesive designs. The Monterey's attempt to stand out with its split grille and unusual headlight placement ultimately resulted in a car that was more memorable for its oddity than for its appeal. Despite these design flaws, the Mercury Monterey remains an interesting example of 1950s automotive design experimentation. Its front end, with its split grille and bug-eyed headlights, is a testament to the era's adventurous spirit and styling, even if it didn't always lead to the most aesthetically pleasing outcomes. The Monterey's unusual appearance makes it a notable piece of automotive history, reflecting a time when car manufacturers were pushing the boundaries of design, sometimes with less than successful results. The Packard Patrician, introduced in the mid-1950s, was meant to be the pinnacle of luxury and elegance for Packard, a brand renowned for its premium vehicles. Unfortunately, the Patrician's design did not quite hit the mark, making it a notable example of how a luxury car can miss the stylistic trends of its time. At its core, the Patrician's design was characterized by a tall, boxy frame that stood in stark contrast to the sleek, aerodynamic contours popular among its contemporaries. While other car manufacturers were embracing a more streamlined and elegant approach to automotive design, the Patrician clung to a more traditional, upright profile. This decision resulted in a vehicle that appeared somewhat out of touch with the era's design evolution. The car's vertical lines and large, imposing grille created a rigid, somewhat dated appearance that failed to captivate the modern aesthetic sensibilities of the mid-1950s. The front end of the Patrician was particularly problematic. Featuring a massive grille and a pronounced bumper, the car's face was overburdened with chrome and heavy lines. The grille's large size and vertical orientation dominated the front view, making the car look cumbersome rather than sleek. The headlights placed on either side of the grille were positioned in a manner that did not complement the overall design, further contributing to the car's awkward appearance. The split grille design, while intended to be distinctive, ended up making the car look less refined and more cumbersome compared to the fluid and graceful lines of competitors' vehicles. The Patrician's profile was equally unimpressive. Its tall, boxy silhouette not only impacted the car's visual appeal, but also its aerodynamic performance. In an era when low, sloping rooflines were becoming the norm for their aerodynamic benefits and stylish looks, the Patrician's upright stance felt outdated. The car's bulkiness extended beyond its proportions. Its large, flat surfaces and squared-off edges made it look more like a relic from an earlier decade rather than a cutting-edge luxury automobile. Inside, the Patrician was equipped with high-end materials and features expected of a luxury vehicle, including plush seating, advanced controls, and quality craftsmanship. However, the exterior design issues overshadowed these interior comforts, failing to create a cohesive impression of sophistication and elegance. The mismatch between the car's opulent interior and its unappealing exterior detracted from the overall luxury experience. Despite Packard's efforts to position the Patrician as a premium option, the car's inability to keep up with the shifting tastes in automotive design led to its eventual decline. The Patrician's lack of aerodynamic finesse and outdated styling choices highlighted Packard's struggle to adapt to the changing automotive landscape. While the car was well-built and boasted many luxury features, its design missteps left it struggling to compete with the more stylish and dynamically designed offerings of the era. In the end, the Packard Patrician stands as a reminder of how important it is for luxury vehicles to align with contemporary design trends. Its tall, boxy frame and blocky front end made it an awkward presence on the road, failing to capture the elegance and sophistication expected of high-end automobiles in the mid-1950s. Despite its luxurious interiors and high-quality construction, the patrician's inability to evolve with the times ultimately marked it as an outlier in the otherwise progressive automotive landscape of its era. The DeSoto Firedome, introduced in the early 1950s as a top-tier model for the brand, was an attempt by DeSoto to capture the growing demand for bold, attention-grabbing cars in the post-war era. Unfortunately, the Firedome's design choices resulted in a vehicle that stood out for all the wrong reasons. Instead of being remembered as a stylish or sophisticated car, it earned a reputation for being overly flashy and awkwardly executed. One of the most notable and problematic features of the Firedome was its exaggerated front grille. Spanning the entire width of the car, this massive grille was filled with large vertical chrome bars that gave the front end a heavy, cluttered look. While many cars of the era embraced chrome as a symbol of luxury and modernity, the Firedome took this trend to an extreme. The grille dominated the car's face, making it seem overwhelming and out of proportion compared to the rest of the design. The excessive use of chrome wasn't just limited to the grille either. It was everywhere. From the bumpers to the trim lines, the Firedome was a chrome lover's dream. But to most people, it simply looked gaudy. The oversized chrome accents continued throughout the car's body, making the Firedome appear as if it was trying too hard to be flashy. Instead of achieving a sleek, modern aesthetic, the chrome overload detracted from the vehicle's overall look, giving it a garish, clumsy vibe. It was clear that the Firedome was meant to grab attention on the road, but it did so for the wrong reasons. Rather than being remembered as an icon of style, it came across as an example of how too much embellishment can ruin an otherwise solid design. The Firedome's roofline was another area where the design faltered. While DeSoto likely intended for the sloping roof and curved rear windows to create a streamlined, futuristic appearance, the effect was anything but harmonious. The roofline felt disconnected from the rest of the car's bulky body, as if the designers had taken inspiration from multiple sources and combined them without considering how the pieces would fit together. The result was an awkward juxtaposition of curves and angles that left the Firedome looking imbalanced and top-heavy. The roofline's odd shape also created a sense of visual weight that clashed with the rest of the car's design elements, making it seem bulky and clunky. From a side view, the Firedome continued to struggle with its proportions. The long, sweeping lines of the body seemed at odds with the heavy front end and exaggerated roofline, creating a disjointed appearance. The large rear fenders, which might have looked elegant on a different car, only added to the Firedome's cumbersome feel. While other automakers were embracing more streamlined and balanced designs during this period, the Firedome seemed stuck between trying to be both bold and graceful, unfortunately failing at both. The interior of the DeSoto Firedome, while relatively well appointed for the time, couldn't save the car from its awkward exterior. Despite featuring upscale materials and comfort-focused features, the overall experience of driving or being seen in a Firedome was overshadowed by its outlandish and disorganized design. The car's lack of cohesive styling made it hard for buyers to take it seriously as a premium offering. In many ways, the Firedome was a reflection of the excesses of 1950s American car design. Automakers were eager to impress consumers with new technologies, materials, and bold styling cues. But in the case of the Firedome, they missed the mark. Instead of achieving a refined balance between form and function, DeSoto's designers created a vehicle that was overly complex and visually overwhelming. In the end, the DeSoto Firedome's combination of an exaggerated grille, too much chrome, and an awkward roofline made it a car that couldn't live up to its flashy aspirations. It remains a reminder of how important it is for design elements to work together rather than compete for attention. The Firedome's cluttered and clumsy appearance left it standing out for all the wrong reasons, making it more of a cautionary tale in automotive design than a celebrated classic. The Willys Aero, introduced in the early 1950s, was Willys Overland's ambitious attempt to enter the compact car market, a segment that was still developing at the time. Unfortunately, while the Aero was intended to be a more refined and practical option for American consumers, its bland and utilitarian design ended up making it one of the most forgettable and unattractive cars of the decade. In an era known for bold, futuristic styling and daring design choices, the Aero's plain appearance seemed particularly out of place, especially when compared to the flashier, chrome-laden competitors that dominated the market. One of the primary issues with the Willys Aero was its plain, uninspired front grille. At a time when automakers were experimenting with intricate grille designs, often using them as defining features to give their vehicles personality, the Aero's front end was remarkably dull. Its simple rectangular grille lacked the flair or character seen in other cars of the 1950s, and it gave the vehicle a utilitarian, almost industrial look. While this minimalist approach may have been functional, it certainly didn't appeal to buyers looking for style or sophistication. Instead of projecting modernity or luxury, the Aero's grille contributed to the car's overall impression of being basic and uninspired. The flat lines of the Aero's body further emphasized its lack of design innovation. While many 1950s cars featured sweeping curves, exaggerated fins, and dynamic shapes that conveyed a sense of motion and excitement, the Aero remained boxy and rigid. Its bodywork was devoid of the dramatic contours and embellishments that characterized the decade, making it look more like an economy car from a previous era than a fresh new entry into the market. This flat, featureless design gave the Aero a static, outdated appearance, making it easy to overlook amidst the flashier competition. Adding to the Aero's woes was the absence of any distinct design cues that could have set it apart from the sea of other vehicles on the road. While automakers like Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler were incorporating unique elements like tail fins, dual headlights, and bold chrome accents, the Willys Aero remained stubbornly plain. It lacked the bold ornamentation that could have given it some character, or at least a sense of identity. Instead, it blended into the background, easily forgotten among the more stylish cars of its time. Even its proportions, neither sleek nor imposing, left little to remember. The Aero was the epitome of conservative design, and not in a good way. Inside the car, things weren't much better. The interior, while functional, was equally bland, reinforcing the idea that the Aero was focused more on practicality than style. While some buyers may have appreciated the car's straightforward, no-frills approach, the majority of consumers in the 1950s were captivated by the allure of cars that combined both function and flair. The Aero's utilitarian focus meant that it failed to generate the excitement that other compact cars like the Nash Rambler or even the early Volkswagen Beetle were able to inspire. Despite these shortcomings, the Willys Aero did have a few redeeming qualities. Its compact size and relatively lightweight design made it more fuel efficient than many larger cars of the era, and it was praised for being easy to drive and maneuver in urban environments. However, these practical advantages couldn't make up for its lack of aesthetic appeal. In a decade where design often took precedence over practicality, the Aero's virtues were overshadowed by its dull looks. Consumers in the 1950s wanted cars that not only got them from point A to point B, but also made a statement while doing so. The Aero, with its forgettable design, simply couldn't compete. Ultimately, the Willys Aero stands as a cautionary tale of what happens when a car's design fails to capture the spirit of its time. While it may have been a competent vehicle in terms of performance, its bland utilitarian appearance made it one of the least attractive and most forgettable cars of the 1950s. In a decade that celebrated boldness and creativity in automotive design, the Aero's conservative styling ensured that it would be overlooked and eventually forgotten. Today, it remains a reminder that even in the world of practical, compact cars, design matters. And there you have it, the 15 ugliest cars from the 1950s that left car experts scratching their heads. While the decade produced some true classics, these models missed the mark in the design department. Which one surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more car history and auto design fails.